standing at my 6-year-old son's graveside watching strangers offer condolences while my own parents were nowhere to be found. I never imagined the betrayal that would follow. 3 weeks later, they showed up at my door with legal documents and a demand that shattered what remained of my broken heart. They wanted Ethan's $860,000 trust fund, the one my late husband had set up for our son's future, to buy my sister Madison a house. The money meant for my dead child's college education would become her dream home down payment. Where are you watching from today? If this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice resonates with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking family drama stories. Trust me, you won't believe what happens when blood relatives show their true colors. Let's dive into how my world completely fell apart and how I fought back. The morning of Ethan's funeral, I woke up expecting the worst day of my life to at least include the support of my family. My beautiful boy had lost his battle with leukemia after 18 months of treatments, hope, and heartbreak. David, my husband, had died in a car accident 2 years prior, leaving me to navigate Ethan's illness alone. Well, not entirely alone. I had my parents, Robert and Susan, and my younger sister, Madison. Or so I thought. I spent the early morning hours getting ready in a haze of grief and exhaustion. The black dress hung loose on my frame. I had lost 20 pounds during Ethan's final months. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Serafina, we're so sorry, but we can't make it today. Madison has a house viewing that she's been waiting months for, and we promised to help her. You understand, right? We'll visit the grave tomorrow." I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the words sank in. My parents were skipping their grandson's funeral for a real estate appointment. Madison, who was 28 and perfectly capable of house hunting alone, apparently needed their support more than I did on the day I buried my child. The funeral was beautiful despite their absence. Ethan's teachers, classmates, parents, neighbors, and David's work colleagues filled the church. My best friend Olivia held my hand as the tiny white casket was lowered into the ground. I kept looking toward the back of the cemetery, hoping to see my parents' car pulling up late. It never came. That evening, Olivia stayed with me as I sorted through the mountain of sympathy cards and flowers. Among them was a thick envelope from the law firm that had handled David's estate. Inside was a letter from Mr. Harrison, David's attorney, along with documents I had never seen before. "I thought you should have these now," his letter read. David set up this trust specifically for Ethan when he was born separate from his main will. Since Ethan has passed, the funds will transfer according to the contingency provisions David established. The trust documents revealed that David had been putting money aside for Ethan since birth. Between his life insurance policy, beneficiary designations, investment growth, and monthly contributions, the trust had grown to $860,000. David had specified that if anything happened to Ethan before he turned 18, the money would go directly to me, no questions asked. He had also included a handwritten note dated just weeks before his accident. "Sarah, if you're reading this, our worst fears have come true. This money was meant to give our son every opportunity in life. Now it's meant to give you a chance to heal and rebuild. Don't let anyone tell you how to use it. Love always, David." I cried, reading his words, feeling his love and foresight even from beyond the grave. David had always been the practical one, thinking ahead, protecting his family. The money felt like his final gift to me. Security and freedom to grieve without financial worry. The next morning, my parents finally appeared at my door. No flowers, no apologies for missing the funeral, just expectant smiles and a manila folder tucked under my mother's arm. "Serafina, honey, we're here to talk about Ethan's money," my mother announced, pushing past me into my living room. My father followed, looking uncomfortable but determined. "What money?" I asked, though my stomach was already dropping. Madison emerged from my kitchen like she owned the place, carrying a cup of coffee she had apparently made herself. She was glowing with excitement, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. The trust fund, Sarah. We know about the 860,000. It's perfect timing, actually. I stared at my sister in disbelief. How do you even know about that? My mother opened the folder and spread papers across my coffee table. Madison found the most gorgeous house in Millbrook Heights. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, updated kitchen, beautiful yard. It's listed at $950,000, but with a good down payment, she can get the mortgage approved. The trust money would be the perfect down payment, Madison added, practically bouncing on her toes. I mean, it's not like Ethan needs it anymore, right? And this way, the money stays in the family. The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Now, Madison, that's not how we agreed to present this. Present what exactly? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother sat down and pulled out a legal document. We've consulted with an attorney. Since Ethan was a minor and you're dealing with such a significant loss, we think it would be best if the family helped manage these funds. Madison has such a bright future ahead of her, and homeownership is a smart investment. We could structure it as a family loan. A loan, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to loan my dead son's trust fund to Madison so she can buy a house? Not loan exactly, my father said quickly. More like a family investment. Madison would pay it back eventually with interest, of course. Madison grabbed my hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. Sarah, please. You know how hard it's been for me to find the right place. I've been living in that tiny apartment for 3 years, and Brent is finally ready to propose, but he wants us to have a real home first. This house is perfect for starting a family. I pulled my hands away, staring at 3 people who suddenly felt like strangers. You want me to give you the money my husband saved for our son, so your boyfriend might propose to you. You're being dramatic, my mother said with a dismissive wave. It's not like you need that much money right now. You have David's life insurance. This house is paid off. And frankly, dear, you need time to heal, not time to make major financial decisions. The patronizing tone in her voice ignited something fierce inside me. These people had missed my child's funeral and were now sitting in my living room drinking my coffee and demanding his inheritance like they had any right to it. Get out, I said quietly. Sarah, be reasonable, my father started. Get out, I screamed, surprising myself with the volume and fury in my voice. All of you get out of my house right now. Madison's face flushed red. Fine, but don't come crying to us when you're sitting alone in this house with more money than you know what to do with while your own sister struggles to build a life. As they gathered their papers and headed toward the door, my mother turned back with a look I had never seen before. Cold, calculating, determined. This isn't over, Serafina. Family takes care of family whether you like it or not. The door slammed, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that I had just lost more than my son and husband. I had lost the family I thought I could count on. The weeks following my family's demand were a blur of sleepless nights and mounting pressure. Every day brought new attempts from my parents and Madison to convince me to do the right thing for the family. My mother called twice daily with guilt trips about Madison's deteriorating mental health over the housing situation. My father sent text messages about family loyalty and how David would have wanted his money to help everyone, not just me. Madison herself showed up unannounced with her boyfriend Brent, a smug real estate agent who had the audacity to bring property listings and mortgage calculations to show me how sensible their request was. But it was Olivia who opened my eyes to what was really happening. Sarah, this isn't normal grief counseling territory, she said during one of our daily coffee meetings. I've been thinking about this for weeks and something feels really wrong. How did Madison even know about the trust fund? I had been wondering the same thing. The documents from David's attorney had been marked confidential, and I certainly hadn't told anyone about them. She said she found out about it, but never explained how. And the timing of this house hunt seems awfully convenient, doesn't it? She's supposedly been looking for 3 years, but suddenly finds the perfect place right after Ethan's funeral. Olivia pulled out her laptop and started typing. As a paralegal, she had access to public records and property databases that I never thought to check. Within minutes, her face had gone pale. "Sarah, you need to see this. The house Madison wants. It's been on the market for 6 months, and the price has been dropped 3 times. It's overpriced in a neighborhood that's not even that desirable. But here's the real kicker. Look at the listing agent." She turned the screen toward me. There, with his professional headshot and company logo, was Brent Morrison, Madison's boyfriend. The same man who had sat in my living room 2 days earlier, presenting himself as an objective expert, helping his girlfriend find her dream home. "He's not just her boyfriend helping her house hunt," Olivia continued. "He's the listing agent trying to move a property that's been sitting stagnant for months. If Madison buys this house with your money, he gets the commission on both ends, listing and selling." The betrayal hit me like a wave. So this whole thing is a scam. It gets worse. Olivia's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Look at this property history. This house was purchased 18 months ago by an LLC, Morrison Properties. Brent bought it himself, probably as a flip investment, and now he's desperate to unload it." I stared at the screen pieces clicking together in my mind. So Madison's dream house is actually Brent's failed investment property, and they're trying to use my son's trust fund to bail him out. That's exactly what it looks like. And given how quickly they moved after Ethan's funeral, I'd bet they've been planning this for a while. The calculating look in my mother's eyes suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't about family loyalty or helping Madison achieve homeownership. This was about a failing real estate investment and 3 people who saw my grief as an opportunity. That evening, I called Mr. Harrison, David's attorney. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and furious. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "David created this trust specifically to protect those funds from exactly this kind of family pressure. The contingency provisions he wrote were crystal clear. If anything happened to Ethan, this money goes directly to you, no strings attached. No one else has any legal claim to it whatsoever." "But they keep talking about family obligations and doing what David would have wanted." "Mrs. Thorne, I knew your husband well. We spent hours discussing his estate planning, and he was very specific about protecting you and Ethan from financial manipulation. He actually mentioned concerns about your family's attitude toward money during one of our meetings." My heart stopped. "He did, yes. He said your parents had a history of treating family members like a bank, and he wanted to make sure his life's work would never be used to fund what he called their expensive mistakes. That's why the trust was set up the way it was, and why he made me promise to explain these protections to you if they ever became necessary." David had seen this coming. Even from the grave, my husband was still trying to protect me from my own family. "What should I do?" I asked. "Document everything. Every conversation, every text message, every visit. If they continue pressuring you or make any threats, we'll file for a restraining order, and under no circumstances should you sign anything they bring you." After hanging up with Mr. Harrison, I sat in my empty house feeling simultaneously heartbroken and empowered. My family had shown their true colors, but David had given me the tools to fight back. I spent the next 2 hours screenshot saving every text message, email, and voicemail my family had sent since the funeral. The evidence painted a clear picture of escalating manipulation and emotional blackmail. My mother's messages ranged from subtle guilt trips to outright demands. Madison's texts grew increasingly hostile with threats to cut me out of family events if I didn't stop being selfish. My father's communications were the most disturbing, formal, legal-sounding language that suggested they might try to challenge the trust in court. But it was a voice message from Madison that revealed the full scope of their deception. "Sarah, it's me again. Look, I talked to Brent and he's willing to reduce his commission if you help us out with this house. We're all family here, and this is a win-win situation. You get to help your sister build a future. Brent gets to close a deal that's been hanging over his head, and Mom and Dad get to see their daughters working together instead of fighting. Please call me back. Time is running out on this opportunity." The casual mention of Brent's commission and his need to close a deal confirmed everything Olivia had discovered. This was never about family loyalty or Madison's dreams. It was about three people conspiring to use my dead child's money to solve their financial problems. I forwarded the voice message to Mr. Harrison with a simple note, "I think we have our evidence." His response came within an hour. "This is attempted financial elder abuse, even though you're not elderly. The manipulation tactics and conspiracy elements make this a serious legal matter. Are you ready to take action?" For the first time since Ethan's funeral, I felt clear about my path forward. My family had made their choice when they decided to skip my son's burial in favor of house hunting. Now I was going to make mine. "Yes," I typed back. "I'm ready to fight." The next morning brought an unexpected escalation. I woke up to find Madison and my parents sitting in my backyard, having somehow gotten through my locked gate. They were at my patio table with coffee and pastries, as if they were hosting a family meeting on my property without my permission. "How did you get into my yard?" I demanded, still in my robe and slippers. "We still have the spare key David gave us years ago," my mother said casually. "We thought a more relaxed setting might help us all communicate better." The invasion of my private space felt like another violation. David had given them that key for emergencies when Ethan was little, not for ambush interventions about money. Madison looked different this morning, harder somehow. Gone was the bubbly excitement about her dream house. In its place was a cold determination that reminded me uncomfortably of our mother. "Sarah, we need to talk seriously about your decision. You're hurting the whole family with this selfishness." "My selfishness?" I sat down across from them, too stunned by their audacity to ask them to leave yet. "I buried my 6-year-old son 3 weeks ago, and you're calling me selfish for not funding your real estate scam." My father leaned forward with the patronizing tone he'd used when I was a teenager. "Sweetheart, you're clearly not thinking straight right now. Grief can cloud judgment, and making major financial decisions while emotional rarely works out well. So you've decided to make them for me." "We've decided to help you make better choices," my mother corrected. "Madison found another property she likes almost as much. It's only $700,000, which means you'd still have over $100,000 left for yourself. See, we're being completely reasonable." I stared at her in disbelief. "You broke into my backyard to tell me about a different house you want me to buy for Madison." "We didn't break in," Madison said defensively. "We're family. And yes, this new house is actually a better investment. Brent ran the numbers." "Of course he did." I pulled out my phone and showed them the property records Olivia had found. "Tell me, Madison, when exactly did you plan to mention that Brent owns the first house you wanted and that your dream home is actually his failed investment property?" The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, and finally defiance. "So what if he owns it?" she snapped. "That doesn't change anything. It's still a beautiful house, and we'd still be paying fair market value." "Fair market value," I laughed harshly. "It's been sitting on the market for 6 months with 3 price drops. That's not fair market value, that's desperation." My father tried a different approach. Serafina, even if Brent has a financial interest, that doesn't mean helping Madison is wrong. She's your sister, and family supports family. Where was this family support when I was sitting alone at Ethan's funeral? The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. Where was family support during his 18 months of treatment Madison visited twice? You two came to exactly 3 doctor appointments out of dozens. But now that there's money involved, suddenly family matters. My mother's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. We were dealing with our own struggles, Serafina. Madison's been having a hard time finding direction in life, and we've been focused on helping her get established. By stealing from her dead nephew's trust fund? It's not stealing, Madison exploded. You don't even need that money. You have everything you could want. This house, David's life insurance, no kids to worry about anymore. I have nothing. The cruelty of her words hit me like a slap. No kids to worry about anymore. She had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but doubled down anyway. You know what I meant. I'm just saying you're in a stable position and I'm trying to build a life. Get out! I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. All of you get out of my house and off my property right now. Sarah, please, my father started. Get out, I screamed, and leave that spare key on the table. You're never welcome here again. As they gathered their things, my mother made one final attempt at manipulation. You're going to regret this decision, Serafina. Family is all you have left, and you're throwing us away over money. When you're sitting alone in this house with all that cash and no one who cares about you, remember that you chose this. After they left, I immediately called a locksmith and then Olivia. She arrived within an hour, finding me crying angry tears in my kitchen. They came into my backyard without permission, I told her. They had a spare key David gave them for emergencies, and they used it to stage an intervention about money. Olivia's face hardened. That's trespassing. The key was given for specific purposes, and this clearly wasn't one of them. There's something else, I said, showing her Madison's comment about not having kids to worry about anymore. She said this in front of my parents, and neither of them corrected her or seemed shocked. Sarah, these people are showing you exactly who they are. The question is, are you going to believe them? That afternoon, Olivia helped me document the trespassing incident and compile everything for Mr. Harrison. As we worked, she asked questions that helped me see patterns I had been blind to for years. When David was alive, how often did your family ask for money? I thought about it. Actually, pretty often. Dad's business had some rough patches, and Mom always needed help with something. David usually said yes to small amounts, but he got tired of the constant requests. And after he died, they backed off during Ethan's illness, but they did ask me to help with Madison's car payment a few times. I was so overwhelmed, I just said yes. So they've been softening you up for this big ask for 2 years. The realization hit me like a truck. This wasn't a spontaneous idea born from grief-clouded thinking. This was a carefully orchestrated plan that had been building since David's death. They had been patient supportive during the worst times, establishing themselves as my only family support system, so they'd be in position to make this demand when the opportunity arose. Olivia, what kind of people plan to steal from a sick child's trust fund? The kind who see family members as financial resources instead of people they love, she said grimly. That evening, I made several important phone calls. First to Mr. Harrison to update him on the trespassing and to discuss next steps. Then to David's brother, Marcus, in Seattle, who I hadn't spoken to since the funeral. Marcus had always been different from David, more cautious, less trusting, but hearing about my family's behavior, he wasn't surprised. David mentioned concerns about your parents during our last conversation, Marcus told me. He said they had expensive tastes and poor judgment with money. He was worried they'd come after you if anything happened to him. Why didn't he tell me? He didn't want to create family drama while you were dealing with Ethan's illness, but he did ask me to keep an eye on things and step in if needed. Consider this me stepping in. Marcus offered to hire a private investigator to look into Brent's financial situation and Madison's recent activities. If they're running a scam, there might be other victims or other schemes. People who do this kind of thing rarely limit themselves to one target. By the end of the day, I had changed my locks, documented 3 separate incidents of financial manipulation, and gained a powerful ally in Marcus, who had resources and motivation to help me fight back. My family thought they could isolate me and pressure me into compliance, but they had miscalculated badly. The war they started over my son's money was about to become much bigger than they anticipated. Marcus's private investigator, Janet Rodriguez, called me 3 days later with news that shattered any remaining illusions about my family's character. Her findings revealed a web of financial deception that went far beyond Madison's house scheme. Your sister and her boyfriend have been running this scam for over a year, Janet explained during our video call. Brent Morrison purchased 4 different properties through shell companies, all overpriced in declining neighborhoods. He's been targeting recently widowed women and people going through major life transitions, using emotional manipulation to convince them to invest in real estate. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed Madison had received payments from 3 different women in the past 18 months. All recent widows who had bought properties through Brent at inflated prices. The pattern was always the same. Madison would befriend vulnerable women at grief support groups, gain their trust, then introduce them to her amazing boyfriend, who could help them invest wisely in real estate. Mrs. Thorne, your family specifically targeted you. Your mother has been attending the same grief support group you mentioned, considering gathering intelligence on recently bereaved women with substantial inheritances. This wasn't opportunistic. It was premeditated fraud. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had experienced, even deeper than their absence at Ethan's funeral. My mother had been researching grief support groups not to help me heal, but to learn how to better manipulate me and find other victims. There's more, Janet continued. Your father's business troubles aren't real. His company is actually quite profitable, but he's been funneling money into offshore accounts while claiming financial hardship to family members. They've bilked your elderly Aunt Martha out of $50,000 over the past 2 years by claiming he needed emergency business loans. Aunt Martha, my father's sister, was 83 and living on a fixed income. She had been sending my parents money she couldn't afford to lose, believing she was helping her brother save his livelihood. What can we do about this? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. We have enough evidence for criminal fraud charges against all 3 of them. The FBI is interested because of the interstate nature of some of their transactions. But I need to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? This will destroy your family relationships permanently. I thought about Ethan's funeral, about sitting alone in that church while my parents helped Madison plan her next scam. I thought about David's carefully crafted trust designed to protect me from exactly this situation. I thought about Aunt Martha alone and struggling financially because she trusted her brother. They destroyed our family relationships when they chose money over my dying son, I said firmly. Let's bring them down. The plan Janet outlined was elegant in its simplicity. We would arrange a meeting where Madison and Brent would make their final pitch for the house money, but this time we'd be recording everything. Meanwhile, the FBI would be coordinating with local authorities to arrest them for fraud charges related to their other victims. I called my mother and arranged a family dinner at a restaurant, neutral ground where they couldn't claim I was being unreasonable or emotional. I've had time to think, I told her, and I want to discuss the house situation calmly. The relief in her voice was palpable. Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd come around. Family always finds a way to work things out. And the irony of her words would have been funny if the situation weren't so devastating. The dinner took place at Russo's, an upscale Italian restaurant where my family loved to celebrate special occasions. They arrived dressed for success. My parents in their best clothes, Madison in a designer dress I now realized had probably been purchased with someone else's stolen money, and Brent wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase full of documents. "Sarah, you look wonderful," my mother gushed, kissing my cheek like we were the perfect loving family. "I'm so glad you decided to hear us out." Madison was practically vibrating with excitement. "I brought new photos of the house and Brent has all the paperwork ready. We can have this wrapped up tonight." Brent opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency, spreading glossy real estate photos and mortgage documents across the table. "Serafina, I've structured this deal to be incredibly favorable for everyone involved. The house appraises at $850,000, but I'm willing to let it go for $700,000 since we're family." "Let it go?" I asked innocently. "I thought Madison was buying it from the current owners." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Brent's face, but he recovered quickly. "Well, technically, my investment company owns it currently, but that's just a formality. The important thing is getting Madison into her dream home." "And what happens to your investment company after this sale?" Madison jumped in before Brent could answer. "Sarah, why does any of that matter? You're helping your sister achieve her dreams while making a smart financial move yourself." "How exactly am I making a smart financial move by giving you $700,000? "It's not giving," my father interjected. "It's a family investment. Madison will pay you back over time." "At what interest rate?" I asked. "What's the payment schedule? What happens if she defaults?" The questions clearly made them uncomfortable. They had expected grief-stricken compliance, not businesslike scrutiny of their proposal. "Sarah, you're overthinking this," my mother said with forced cheerfulness. "This is family, not some cold business transaction." "You're right," I said, pulling out my phone and placing it conspicuously on the table. "This isn't a business transaction at all. It's fraud." The change in atmosphere was immediate and electric. Brent's hand froze halfway to his water glass. Madison's smile faltered. My parents exchanged glances that confirmed they knew exactly what I was talking about. "I know about the other properties, Brent. I know about the shell companies and the inflated prices. I know about the 3 widows Madison befriended at grief support groups before targeting me." Madison's face went white. "Sarah, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I know about Aunt Martha's $50,000, Dad. I know your business isn't struggling and that you've been stealing from an 83-year-old woman who trusts you." My father's composed mask slipped completely. "You don't understand the complexities of the situation. I understand that my son's funeral was less important to you than planning your next con. I understand that you've been using my grief as a weapon against me. I understand that you're criminals." Brent stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. We should probably call it a night." "Sit down," I said calmly. "We're just getting to the good part." That's when the restaurant doors opened and FBI agent Sarah Kim walked in, followed by 2 local detectives. The looks of absolute terror on my family's faces would have been satisfying if the betrayal didn't hurt so deeply. "Brent, Morrison, Madison Hartwell, Robert, and Susan Hartwell," Agent Kim announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and money laundering." As handcuffs clicked into place and Miranda rights were read, my mother looked at me with pure hatred. "You've destroyed your own family, Serafina. Was your precious money worth it?" "No," I replied, standing to leave. "But my son's memory was." The arrest at Russo's restaurant made local news within hours. The image of my well-dressed family being led out in handcuffs, while other diners watched in shock, became the lead story on 3 different news channels. The headline read, "Local family accused of multi-state fraud scheme targeting grieving widows." I spent the rest of that evening at the police station, providing additional evidence and answering questions for the FBI's case. Agent Kim walked me through what would happen next: arraignments, preliminary hearings, and eventually a trial if they didn't accept plea agreements. "Your cooperation has been invaluable," she told me as we finished up. "Without your willingness to wear a wire tonight, we might not have gotten the confessions we needed for the conspiracy charges." The wire had been Janet's idea, and wearing it had felt like betraying family right up until I heard my parents and Madison casually discussing their previous victims over dinner. My mother had actually laughed about that stupid old woman Martha and how easy it had been to convince her that my father needed emergency business loans. "What happens to their other victims?" I asked. "We're working on asset recovery. Brent's been moving money between accounts, but we've frozen everything we can find. The 3 widows Madison targeted will likely recover most of their losses, and your Aunt Martha should get her $50,000 back." Driving home alone, I felt strangely empty. The victory felt hollow. I had won, but what had I really gained? My family was gone, destroyed by their own greed and my determination to protect David's legacy. Ethan was still gone. David was still gone. The money couldn't bring back what mattered most. But when I walked into my quiet house and saw David's picture on the mantel next to Ethan's, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the funeral piece. I had honored my husband's wishes and protected my son's memory. That had to count for something. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus had flown in from Seattle overnight, and he stood on my doorstep with coffee and bagels from my favorite bakery. "I figured you might not want to be alone today," he said simply. We sat in my kitchen eating breakfast and watching the morning news coverage of the arrests. The reporter standing outside the courthouse was interviewing other victims who had come forward overnight. The story was bigger than anyone had initially realized. "David would be proud of you," Marcus said quietly. "He always said you were stronger than you knew." "I don't feel strong. I feel like I just blew up my entire family." "Sarah, they blew up the family when they decided to steal from their dead grandson's trust fund. You just lit the fuse they had already set." My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from reporters wanting interviews, but there was one call I did take, from Aunt Martha. "Serafina, dear, I just saw the news," her shaky voice said through the phone. "I can't believe Robert and Susan. I trusted them completely." "I'm so sorry, Aunt Martha. I should have known they were taking advantage of you, too." "Oh, honey, this isn't your fault. I'm actually calling to thank you. Agent Kim says I'll get my money back, but more importantly, you stopped them from hurting other people. That takes real courage." Her words meant more to me than any news coverage or legal victory could. Aunt Martha represented the type of person David and I had always tried to be, someone who trusted family, who gave others the benefit of the doubt, who deserved protection from predators. That afternoon, Mr. Harrison called with updates on the civil side of things. "The FBI has asked us to freeze any transfers related to Ethan's trust fund just as a precaution, but there's no risk to your ownership of those funds. However, there is something else we need to discuss." "What now?" "Your parents' attorney contacted me this morning. They want to negotiate a family settlement to avoid trial. They're offering to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for your agreement not to pursue additional civil damages." What kind of damages could I pursue? Emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional harm, defamation. The fact that they attempted this scam so soon after your son's funeral could be worth significant money in civil court. Their attorney is clearly worried about that. I thought about it for a moment. What would a settlement mean? They'd plead guilty, serve reduced jail time, pay full restitution to all victims, and agree to have no contact with you ever again. It would be over quickly and quietly. And if we go to trial, they could face maximum sentences, possibly 10 to 15 years each for the federal charges alone. But trials are unpredictable, and it would mean months or years of legal proceedings. And the decision felt important, like it would define who I was going to be moving forward. Did I want revenge, or did I want peace? That evening, I walked through the house David and I had bought when we were young and optimistic about our future. Every room held memories of our life together, of Ethan's childhood of dreams that had been cut short by tragedy. But sitting in Ethan's room looking at his books and toys, I realized what David would want me to choose. He had always believed in justice, but not in cruelty. He had protected his family fiercely, but he had also believed in second chances and redemption. Taking my family's offer wouldn't be weakness. It would be strength. I called Mr. Harrison back. I want to take the settlement, but with additional conditions. They have to participate in victim impact statements, they have to complete financial counseling, and they have to write personal apologies to every person they hurt, including Aunt Martha and those 3 widows. Those are reasonable requests. I'll present them tomorrow. And I want one more thing. I want them to visit Ethan's grave and apologize to him for missing his funeral. I want it documented. Sarah, I'm not sure a judge would require that. Then make it part of the civil settlement. They apologize to my son, or we go to trial, and I sue them for everything they have left. It was a small thing, perhaps petty, but it mattered to me. They had missed the chance to say goodbye to their grandson in life. The least they could do was acknowledge him in their disgrace. 2 days later, Mr. Harrison called with news that they had accepted all my conditions. They'll plead guilty next week, and the victim impact phase will begin immediately after. You'll have the chance to address the court about how their actions affected you. Good, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. I have a few things I'd like to say. The courthouse was packed on the day of sentencing. Media attention had turned my family's fraud scheme into a cautionary tale about elder abuse and grief exploitation. I sat in the front row with Marcus Olivia and Janet Rodriguez, watching as my parents and Madison were led to their seats in orange jumpsuits. Judge Patricia Coleman had a reputation for being tough on financial crimes, especially those targeting vulnerable populations. She reviewed the case file with obvious disgust before addressing the defendants. This court has seen many fraud cases, but rarely one that demonstrates such calculated cruelty toward family members, she began. The defendants targeted grieving widows, elderly relatives, and ultimately attempted to steal from a deceased child's trust fund. These actions represent a profound betrayal of basic human decency. My father hung his head as she spoke, but my mother stared straight ahead with the same cold expression I had seen that day in my backyard. Madison cried quietly, but I couldn't tell if the tears were from remorse or self-pity. When it came time for victim impact statements, Aunt Martha spoke first. At 83, she needed help getting to the podium, but her voice was strong and clear. Robert was my little brother, and I loved him unconditionally for 70 years. She said, looking directly at my father. When he told me his business was failing, I gave him money I couldn't afford to lose because that's what family does. But he wasn't failing. He was stealing. He stole my security, my trust, and my faith in family. Those are things money can't buy back. The 3 widows from Madison's previous scams spoke next, each telling stories of how Madison had befriended them at their lowest points, gained their trust through shared grief, then convinced them to make investments that only benefited her and Brent. Their stories were heartbreakingly similar to my own experience. When my turn came, I walked to the podium carrying a photo of Ethan and David together, taken just weeks before David's accident. I placed it on the podium where my family could see it. Your Honor, my husband David died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving me to care for our 6-year-old son, Ethan, who was battling leukemia. During those 18 months of treatment, my parents visited exactly 3 times. My sister Madison came twice. When Ethan died 3 months ago, they missed his funeral because Madison had a house appointment. I paused, looking at Madison directly. She was still crying, but she met my eyes for the first time since the arrests. 3 weeks later, they came to my home demanding $860,000 from Ethan's trust fund so Madison could buy a house. Not borrow, demand. They told me I was being selfish for not giving them my dead son's inheritance. They said I didn't need the money because I had no kids to worry about anymore. Madison flinched visibly at her own words being repeated in court. But this case isn't really about money, I continued. It's about what happens when people choose greed over love, when they see family members as resources instead of human beings. My parents and sister didn't just steal money from their victims. They stole trust, security, and faith in family bonds. Those are the real crimes here. I picked up Ethan's photo and looked at it one more time before continuing. My husband set up that trust fund to protect our son's future. When that future was cut short, the money became David's final gift to me, security and the freedom to grieve without financial pressure. The defendants wanted to use that money to cover up a real estate scam and fund their lifestyle. They wanted to steal from my dead child to pay for their crimes. When I finished speaking, the courtroom was completely silent. Judge Coleman took a moment before proceeding to sentencing. My parents each received 4 years in federal prison with an additional 2 years of supervised release and mandatory financial counseling. Madison received 3 years and Brent got 6 years as the ringleader of the real estate scheme. All assets would be liquidated for victim restitution, and they were permanently banned from any real estate or financial services work. But it was the judge's final comments that provided the closure I needed. The defendants will spend their incarceration time considering how they destroyed their own family through greed and manipulation. They had the love and trust of people who would have helped them through any legitimate struggle, but they chose deception and exploitation instead. They will have to live with those choices for the rest of their lives. After the sentencing, I fulfilled one final requirement of our civil settlement. My family was transported under guard to Greenvale Cemetery, where Ethan was buried next to his father. I stood with Marcus and Olivia as my parents and Madison approached the small white headstone that read, "Ethan David Thorne, beloved son, forever in our hearts." My mother spoke first, her voice hollow and mechanical. "Ethan, I'm sorry I missed your funeral. I'm sorry for what I tried to do with your trust fund. I made terrible choices, and I'm sorry." My father's apology was similar, formal and legal sounding, even in this sacred space. But Madison's was different. She knelt beside the headstone, her orange jumpsuit stark against the green grass. "Ethan, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know that I loved you," she said, her voice breaking. "I was so focused on what I wanted that I forgot what mattered. I forgot about you and about being the aunt you deserved. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed family most." It was the first time since this whole ordeal began that Madison seemed genuinely remorseful rather than just sorry she got caught. As we drove away from the cemetery, Marcus squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" "Free," I said, surprising myself with the honesty of it. "For the first time since David died, I feel free." 6 months later, I used part of Ethan's trust fund to establish the David and Ethan Thorne Foundation, providing financial assistance to families dealing with childhood cancer. The rest I invested safely following David's conservative financial wisdom and Mr. Harrison's guidance. Olivia and Marcus became my chosen family, along with Aunt Martha, who moved closer to me after her own ordeal. We spent holidays together, created new traditions, and built something stronger than blood relations. Relationships based on genuine care and mutual respect. I never heard from my parents or Madison again after their sentencing. They were released to a halfway house across the country and chose to start new lives far from the wreckage of their crimes. Sometimes I wonder if they learned anything from their time in prison, but mostly I don't think about them at all. The house in Millbrook Heights that started this whole nightmare sat empty for another year before finally selling at auction for $400,000. barely half what Madison had wanted me to pay for it. Brent's real estate empire collapsed completely, and several properties were sold at significant losses. Standing in my kitchen one evening, looking at photos of David and Ethan on the refrigerator, I realized something profound had happened during this terrible experience. I had learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about people who show up when you need them most, who celebrate your victories and hold you through your losses, who see your pain and respond with love instead of opportunity. My real family had been right there all along. I just had to have the courage to see them. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that shattered your assumptions about blood loyalty? What would you have done in my situation? Pursued maximum justice through trial, or chosen the settlement path for closure? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story of family karma and justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories. Thank you for listening to my journey from devastating betrayal to unexpected freedom. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into. Until next time, may justice find its way to your own life when you need it most.